The On the Mark podcast is brought to you in part by Synovus. Synovus, the bank of here. Here should be the most important place to your bank because here is where you are. Synovus, the bank of here.
Welcome to On the Mark, a PGA Tour podcast. Here's your host, someone who walks inside the ropes but thinks outside the box, Mark Immelman.
Here at the On the Mark podcast, we are very fortunate and very blessed. For many reasons, really. First off, you folks, our On the Mark tribe who download this podcast, we're fortunate to have you all, and we're fortunate that you are supporting us and telling your friends about this podcast, and we are growing from strength to strength. Global, we're a movement, we're a global tribe, and we are growing fast, so I'm thankful and we are fortunate that we have you guys. Secondly, the guests we managed to bring you guys, the great minds, the thought leaders, they are really cool. And oftentimes, we get really fortunate with timing, and this podcast is one of those. First off, I am Mark Immelman. Thank you for downloading this one. Appreciate you guys all, one and all. I hope you've been doing well. Reach out to us via Twitter at On The Mark Radio. Give us a follow there and let us know if you've been achieving your goals in golf. Let us know if we've helped you. Do tweet us, do give us a follow, and let us know. If you've got any advice or any folks you'd like us to reach out to bring them to our tribe, do let us know there also. Instagram, I'm at Mark_Immelman. And of course, you can find all the podcasts at pgatour.com/onthemark or at iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, Amazon, Alexa, Google Play, the PGA Tour app. So I mentioned Jeff Smith and how we get fortunate with timing of interviews. Well, this last week I should say, 2018, Aaron Wise broke through another young star on the PGA Tour, now in the winner's circle, just 21 years young at the time of the release of this podcast, on the doorstep of his 22nd birthday, which is my lucky number, just for the record, 22, anyhow. And Aaron, wonderful golf course, Trinity Forest, great field. We had awesome weather except for on the last day, but that made it all the more intriguing, and young Aaron Wise held off a number of PGA Tour studs, and Mark Leishman, Brandon Grace, Jordan Spieth made a run, Adam Scott was there, Jimmy Walker. I mean, it was basically like a who's who there for a little while. And the young stud out of Oregon University, the University of Oregon, left school early after his sophomore year, after he won the NCAA championship, led his team to a national championship, makes his way onto the tour via the Mackenzie Tour, the PGA Tour Canada, the Web.com Tour, and now he's a PGA Tour winner with rounds of 65, 63, 68, and 65. And I was out there on the course covering the final round, and man, did he hit some clutch shots coming down the stretch. He made some awesome putts. He had some high-quality golf shots under the heat of Mark Leishman staring down his neck, and it was a very impressive performance from a young man who I first watched play a couple of years ago at the Shriners Hospitals for Children Open in Las Vegas as a rookie. And so congratulations to Aaron from all of us, and congratulations to his coach, Jeff Smith, who I caught up with late last week at the At&T Byron Nelson. Neither of us knew that this was going to turn out as good as what it did, but the timing for you guys, our On The Mark tribe, is absolutely perfect, because now Jeff Smith has a winner on the PGA Tour, and he is a bright mind with some savvy insights that I know are going to help you to strike the golf ball better. This segment of the On The Mark podcast, it's brought to you by Synovus. Synovus, the bank of here. It's been a long time coming, but I've got the Radar Golf Pro on the podcast. Jeff, what is going on? How are you?
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Oh, very good morning. I mean, I'm in Dallas. You're on the Pacific coast, on the West Coast, so I've got you very early, but I appreciate your time. In the interests of keeping this brief and getting us out of your hair, I want to set Jeff Smith up for our global audience. So tell us a little bit about you, man. Just share how you came to where you are.
Well, it's a very interesting story. I would say
we like those.
A road that really few have traveled. So getting to where I'm at in the level of golf instruction I'm at right now, it's kind of a fairy tale, and it's honestly the stars kind of aligned for me to be doing what I'm doing right now. But I would say I was kind of a late bloomer in golf. I was first introduced to the game vaguely by my great grandfather when I was about eight or 9 years old.
Okay.
And that kind of just involves, trips to the driving range, occasionally going to the golf course with him when he would play. There wasn't a lot. I didn't have any formal instruction, and I wasn't doing a lot of playing at that time. It wouldn't be until probably in my early teens, 13, 14, when I actually got my own set of golf clubs. As you probably know, I grew up in rural Tennessee. The nearest driving range, the nearest golf course was about 20, 25 minutes away from my house. So there wasn't a lot of opportunity to play golf where I grew up. We were more into, the major sports, football, baseball, basketball, that kind of stuff. So, in fact, my high school didn't get a high school golf team until I was a sophomore in high school. So one of my claim to fame is that I was on the inaugural team.
You're a founder, man. You're a trailblazer.
Can you believe that in the 20th century?
Oh, man, that's cool. That's a cool story, though.
So, yeah, I got a really late start in the game. I wasn't a great player. Didn't have any kind of scholarship offers, so there was no college golf in my future. But when I got to college, it was really the inquisitive part of, I guess, of my life and career as it relates to golf. With all the other sports, I was always fascinated with, being really good at them, really having a high level understanding of technique and strategy. I mean, even with football and basketball and things of that nature, I would really break those sports down and try to figure out, okay, what are these great coaches and players really doing? Why are they better than everybody else? And that kind of I just kind of kept that pathway in golf. And as you know, I grew up with a guy that's been on your show before, Joseph Mayo,
the maestro, the maestro.
Yeah, TrackMan Maestro. And early in those formative years, there was just a lot of me and Joe just kind of bouncing ideas, reading everything on the planet, watching all of the videos, videotaping. I mean, we would literally record golf tournaments on TV and go back and slow-mo rewind all the swings of Tiger and David Duval and Ernie Els and all these guys and try to figure out what they were doing. And so our backyard was very much like an experiment, going on back there.
Best way to learn, man.
Yeah, the frustrating part was one week I'd be like, Joe, I've got it. This is it. This is what we've got to do. And of course it wasn't it. And we'd keep struggling and keep doing the same things. And then we'd go see another teacher. And so in college, it was a lot of go see other teachers, reading books, get around other great players, see what they're doing. And it was just kind of this process of gathering information. I mean, what I teach today and I think what Joe teaches really wouldn't look anything like it did back in those days because we were influenced by, all of the same information that everybody else was, influenced by. And as a career, I kind of took a very weird path. I took a break from golf. So when I got out of college, I moved to Southern California, and I kind of started my, career in golf in Southern California, and I started out in retail.
Okay.
Working for a golf company, and really quick, I was like, yeah, this is nice. It's cool to learn the tech side of equipment, but I really want to be in golf. And so I moved to Palm Springs, and this was in 1999. Started at the bottom, working out at PGA West at one of their properties, club called the Citrus, and working outside services, cleaning clubs, parking cars, all the
you paid your
all
dues.
The dirty work.
You paid your dues.
Yeah, all the dirty, but it was great because I was able to be around a lot of great players. So at any given time on the back of our range, you'd have Nick Faldo, you'd have Lee Trevino, you'd have Mac O'Grady, Fred Couples, and so before I even knew who Mac O'Grady was, I was sitting on the back of the range watching him hit balls one day for about an hour. And I would just constantly bring golf balls to him, interrupting him, like acting like I was doing something, bringing him more balls because I wanted to see what he was doing.
Stealing with your eyes. I love that, man. That's so cool.
Yeah. So, he would be working with other players. I'd try to get as close as I could without interrupting to hear what he was saying. And, those were some very influential days early in my career. And the tough part about Palm Springs is it's so seasonal. Early in that, at that time, I'm 22, 23 years old, about to have my first child. And I'm like, wow, I'm making good money in the season, but I'm going absolutely broke in the off season. Uh-huh. And so I actually got recruited to go work for Target, a retailer in the States here. And for several years, I actually left golf completely because I was like, I need to make some money here. I'm, working outside services. This isn't really paying the bills. And so I went to work for Target, and I kind of climbed the ranks of that company really fast. And the next thing you know, I was a store manager. I had my own $100 million Target store that was
really? That's cool.
With 500 employees. And so that's where I think I learned a lot of structure and organizational skills and communication skills as it relates to teaching golf. And I did that for a few years, but again, it was very unfulfilling. I was making great money, working a lot of hours, not very happy with my career path. And then one day I just looked at my wife and I said, there's no way I could do this for the next 25 years. I've got to go back and get into golf.
And so, she was like, sure, why don't you go and teach golf?
It was honestly, to be quite honest, I was making $175,000 a year in mid 2000s. And
that's a lot of money, man.
I was rolling the dice. I mean, that was an incredible amount of money for me at the time. And I was rolling the dice. I was going to go teaching golf lessons for $70 an hour, That led me to Las Vegas, where I had my first opportunity to start teaching, at a club, first at an indoor facility and then at a club. And then from there, it just kind of went from one property to the next. And then eventually I landed at TPC Summerlin about five years ago. And I've been there ever since. But it was kind of an odd path to where I'm at right now. But I tell the story because it's very interesting.
Well, you know what? As I listen to your path and you sort of encapsulate the story, I hear a lot of me in you, because I was at one stage as a young teacher in the European tour. I was packing boxes in a clothing warehouse in London to be able to foot my next bill to go to the next European tour event. So I get it, man. And those are the places for the folks listening. There's a lesson in this. Passion is one thing, but you've got to be able to put the foundation underneath what you do. And sometimes that might be outside of your gig. I say that so many times to young professional golfers who come out, they're like, well, if only I can get a sponsor. I'm like, listen, big guy, sometimes you just got to do what you got to do to be able to, go ahead and chase your dreams.
Yeah, no doubt. And I would say that probably the biggest influence that on my career in terms of success has been social media.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is, growing up, I'm 43 years old. So when I got into golf, there was one route. You go work at a club, you join the PGA, you become an apprentice, you get in the program, and you kind of work your way up that way. And that all changed when social media came about, because anybody who had enough courage to stand in front of a camera and present their information to an audience now had a roadway and had a path to success, because people, your audience is so vast now. Most guys, a lot of guys in our industry will have 50, 75, 100,000 followers. And so I have 10 times more lessons than I can even teach at this point, Mark.
Yeah,
I turned down 80% of the people who contact me because there just simply isn't enough hours in the day.
Yeah, okay.
And it's all due to social media.
Okay, to that end, I want to ask you a question, because that's how we became aware of you, and that's how I became aware of you. And obviously we had Joe on, and Joe was kind of sort of the tip of the spear, I guess, because he was outspoken. You were a little bit more, and with love to Joe, a little bit more tempered in your release of your information. But that being said, I experience it in broadcast, and sometimes when I put the odd teaching thing out there, you're going to get your your requisite amount of hate from folks. So tell me how, because I'm sure there might be some young teachers listening to this. How did you navigate, the not just the positive, but the negatives of that as well?
Well, it's one of the things that left a very sour taste in my mouth about golf as a profession. I think the coaching aspect of golf is unlike any other profession or sport. And what I mean by that is golf coaches for the last 50 years have been very secretive, very guarded, very, very insecure. That's the word I look at it. Insecure about their information. Hey, I don't want anyone coming to teach on my driving range. I'm not going to share what I do with other people. There hasn't been any, this grow the game initiative. It didn't exist back then. Teachers weren't willing to share. And when you think about, like right now, we do golf schools together sometimes, myself, Joe, Grant, George Gankis. We'll just have a collection of teachers, and we actually allowed coaches to come and shadow our golf schools while we're teaching players. Mm-hmm. And if I would have had that when I first started, I would have been all over it. Like if I could go watch Butch and Ledbetter, Hank, and all McLean and all the kind of legends of the game back in the late 80s, early 90s, I mean, it would have been an incredible experience. But now we actually have that roadway with social media and the internet and websites, and the information is so freely available now that I think that coaches and players can just, I'm living proof of it.
Well,
they can get so good so fast.
Mm-hmm. Hey, to your point, I mean, on the PGA Tour still, me as now, they see me coming. I'm a golf teacher now with a microphone in my hand, and so I'll ask them the questions that I should as an announcer and a rover and such, but then I'll ask them something about what they do, and oftentimes you still get, I'm working on a few things, it's kind of like you get the vague answer. But all to that, what you say is why our podcast exists, because I want to make folks like you available to people all around the world, because when I was a young kid growing up in South Africa, I had the Golf Digest. We didn't have television, and so I used to clip out all the swing sequences, and like you, I went and looked at these sequences and found commonalities and basically formed my own belief system. But now as I'm doing this, I even am opened up to all manner of minds, and that's what's so much fun for me, to get folks collectively. And even though folks, we get different people on this podcast, somewhere, somehow, some person is going to find something that's going to help them to better understanding. And so we really, you would agree, are kind of growing the game, right?
No doubt. I mean, even if they don't find the technical nugget in your podcast, hopefully they'll find even some kind of inspirational nugget to get involved and do something and have the courage to put their stuff out there for everybody to see and critique and criticize.
Yeah. Okay, to that, let's get technical, shall we? That's why we got the Radar Golf Pro on here. Folks reach out to us via the Twitter handle, and they pitch questions and stuff. And for the common golfer, and I use the term common respectfully, everyone talks about power now, and you work with some powerful young guys. Aaron Wise is legit, in my opinion. I'm just saying, okay. To really get the golf ball to go, you got to strike this thing flush. You got to compress the golf ball. So, Jeff, let's go there. I want you to wax a little bit about compression and just talk about it, and then I want maybe to share a few generic ideas that can help our folks who are listening to this to perhaps get a bit more out of the club face and the golf ball.
Compression. Wow, that's a broad target.
Well, go where you want,
there, Mark. So I would say, first of all, just like anything, if you're gonna describe compression, you need to be able to kind of define it. So that's the first thing I would do for your viewers, is because, like golf, there's all different types of definitions of things. Some people are like, yeah, compression, I can hear it, that whistling sound of the ball through the air. Some people are like, I can hear it. When this guy hits the ball, it sounds different than other people. Mm-hmm. But I like to use a more defined definition, and this is where I would default a little bit to technology. So TrackMan defines compression for us, and
smash factor,
the term that TrackMan used, smash factor, but I go even a little bit more technical than that. It's called spin loft.
Oh, okay, yes.
And So spin loft for your viewers is basically the difference between the dynamic loft of the club, so how much loft you're delivering to the golf ball, and the three-dimensional travel of the club head, so the angle of attack, whether the club's moving up into the ball, down into the ball, or level into the ball.
Okay.
And so the narrower the spin loft angle, the more solid the strike is, the more compression there is. So think of a 1-iron hitting 2 or 3 degrees down on a 1-iron with not very much loft. There's going to be a high level of compression.
Yes.
And then when you think of the opposite side of spin loft, think of a wedge, hitting a sand wedge where the loft is pointed up in the air and the club is moving downward in the ball. That spin loft angle is very, very wide. So there's a very low measure of compression with a wedge. And in terms of swing mechanics as it relates to creating more compression, I could go a lot of different routes in this, but I'll take a simple route, and I'll say that if we need to have less dynamic loft and we need to have not a steep angle of attack to create, by TrackMan's terminology, low spin loft, then we're going to need to have some ability to be de-lofting the club at impact.
Yes. And
we're going to have some ability to be shallow into the golf ball. And so where I would go from a swing mechanics perspective with that is with sequencing. So
I like that.
When you think of good golfers who have a lot of rotation in their golf swing, so at impact their bodies are very rotated and very open to the target.
Okay.
You're not going to find many golfers who don't have shaft lean who are in that position.
I see what you're saying.
So by definition, most golfers who are very rotated at impact, very open, have the handle some amount forward, and they are reducing dynamic loft. So that I would say if you only did that, you would be well on your way to creating more compression.
Okay, can I stop you there? Because I know what the golf person's like. They hear something, it sounds sexy, like you've just delivered, very informational and very concise. I love the way you describe it. Now they will rush out to the driving range, or they might be on the driving range listening to this right now, and so they're like, okay, rotate. So they're rotating like banshees, but they haven't presented that club face adequately, and so they're wiping across the inside of the golf ball, maybe the outside, with nothing really on it. So speak about then how to align the wrists or such to get that face looking appropriate to what you say.
Yeah, perfect. So if you'll remember, I defaulted my first answer to sequencing. So when I describe the golf swing, I'm heavily influenced with biomechanics.
Yes.
And heavily influenced with this fancy word called kinetics. And kinetics are basically just describing the golfer applied forces on the club. So you'll hear me talk a lot about forces and torques in the club. And it's my fundamental belief that every golfer, what they do with their body in the downswing, either staying in their tilt, staying in their posture, rotating, not rotating, sliding, everything that they do after they have transitioned the golf club is a direct response to two things. The first thing it's a response of is how the shaft pitches in transition.
Okay.
Does it steepen, get more vertical, or does it shallow?
Copy.
So that's the first thing. And the way I describe that to students on my lesson tee is I define the center of mass of the golf club, basically the balance point of the club. So if you held the club on your finger, where would that club balance on your hand? And it would be somewhere down the shaft closer to the club head, a few inches up from the hosel. So your viewers can kind of balance the club on their finger and kind of visualize, okay, that balance point is the point that Jeff is referencing. And I want to see how does that point move in transition? Does it lay down and move behind the golfer, or does it stand up and move in front of the golfer? So that's the first prerequisite.
Okay.
The second prerequisite is what is the face angle doing? As the shaft is laying down, is the face angle closing or is the face angle opening?
I need to stop you. Okay, I'm sitting here, man. I want to grab my popcorn. I'm salivating right now because I know where you're going, and I'm just gonna let you have the stage. This is such good stuff, man.
Perfect. Perfect.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah. So vision this. And at the end of the day, Mark, golf is only about matchups, functional matchups. Because if you stand on the PGA Tour range like I do every single week, you're going to look up and down it and go, wow, there's a lot of different golf swings here. But I've learned to view these golf swings in terms of matchups now. So I know why they're doing what they're doing before I ever watch them hit a golf ball. When I watch a swing, I'm only paying attention to in the very beginning stages of what I'm describing to your viewers right now. Which way is the center of mass moving in transition? Again, is it moving behind them, shallowing, or is it moving steeply in front of them? And then secondly, what are they doing with the face angle? And notice that I'm not saying what are they doing with the wrist, because golfers can have extended cupped left wrist and they can have closed club face. It depends on how strong the grip is.
Yes, of course.
So, you take a guy like Brendan Steele, got a super strong grip, goes to the top. When he starts down, the wrist looks very cupped, but the shaft is shallowing and the face is closing. And he just takes it a nice pivot and takes it around the corner. And Brendan's one of the straightest drivers of a golf ball I've ever seen. And he hits lasers with his iron.
Man, you're preaching now. You are preaching now. Go.
Yeah, but then you can look at the opposite side of that spectrum and go, wow, look at John Rahm. He's got a super weak grip, and he flattens the shaft in transition, but he bows his wrist. So why is he going into flexion? Well, it's because he had such a weak grip, he needed some mechanism for closing that face.
So that's the matchup you're talking about.
Yeah, so the matchup is he's flattening the shaft and closing the face. A golfer that steepens the shaft, they can't afford to close the face early in transition because they'll hit the ball to the left. So what they're going to do is when they steepen the shaft, they're going to start reorientating their body. So this is going back to your original question about how to get more compression. Okay? Golfers, so when I told you I'm thinking about those matchups, the golfer that flattens the shaft and puts the center of mass behind them and closes the face, the way that they're going to use the body after that first move has happened is they're going to have more of a rotational pattern.
Yeah. Okay.
Think Sergio, think Ricky, a lot of guys who are really spinning open. Those guys are going to have, and at the beginning of the podcast, I mentioned, well, my one thing to get more compression would be to get the golfer more rotated open at impact.
Yeah.
Well, if your wrist is cupped at the top and the face is wide open and the shaft is deep in transition, getting open is not an option for you.
Yeah, you're right.
So you're going to slice the golf ball and you're not going to have any measure of compression. But the golfer who can put the sweet spot or the shaft behind them, close the face, now can rotate, which is now going to have more shaft lean and more reduction of dynamic loft, and that's when the compression is going to go up.
Okay, I love that, man. That stuff is spectacular, and so and you made it easy for folks to comprehend. So now, the people are like, okay, where do I fit into the spectrum? Let's address them. And I know this is generic, and when I ask these questions, oftentimes good instructors are like, well, and they give me the whole thing. But I know you can give me a generic response here. For the golfer who's open and a little cupped at the top, and for the golfer who's closed at the top. Now, obviously, the person that's too open needs to be on the way to closing, and the person perhaps who's too closed needs to be on the way to opening or sort of square. So speak about that, how they go about adjusting that situation.
Yeah, I would say, Mark, for the masses, and I'll be quite honest, I don't teach very many high handicap golfers anymore.
Okay.
At this point, I'm on the road so often, and when you're teaching high handicappers, you need to be very readily available to them. They need a program and a plan to get better, and that's probably going to be a little bit more frequency in a lesson. So for the masses, I would say that they need to be working on closing the face the soonest in the downstroke, closing the face the soonest in transition, putting the club the farthest behind them.
Can I stop you? Because
And
we're about to blow a myth out the water here now, because they all hear that you mustn't cast the club or you mustn't whatever. But, when you get to closing that face, it won't look as lagged on the downswing as people think is good, because I think folks misinterpret what lag should really look like.
yeah, you're 100% correct. And there's a reason why, guys like me who've done extensive measuring in 3D can put these pieces together and put these matchups together, because if you think of your left wrist only, and for your viewers, if they can get their left wrist out in front of them as I've talked through this, it's moving in four ways, right? It's moving into flexion, which is kind of bowing and arching your wrist. It's moving into extension, which is kind of cupping your wrist, and it's moving downward. That's called ulnar deviation, and it's moving upward, and that's called radial deviation. And the moving upward is kind of the lag, right?
Yeah.
And those four ranges of motion that I just described, well, they kind of go together. So extension, cupping your wrist, goes with radial deviation, which would be lag.
Yes.
So anytime we see someone who's really lagging the club, you can guarantee that they don't have special joints in their wrist. They have got joints just like you, and their wrist is locked into radial deviation and extension to be able to support all of that lag.
Yeah.
And I grew up in that generation of golfers.
Me too.
And I think it destroyed a ton of good golfers because it created chaos at the bottom of the arc. So it's the most timing dependent. It's the most timing dependent golf pattern.
Hey, but don't you think perhaps, and I'm going down a different track now and I need to be careful, but quickly, some of that was sort of influenced. I mean, I'm a little older than you, but, the spinny Balata ball and such, I think some of it may have been a product of the equipment that was used at that stage.
It could have been, but I would say this, that spinny Balata golf ball, if we had had a better understanding of spin loft, we wouldn't have been trying to beat down on that thing.
That's true.
We wouldn't have been. We would have been trying to be shallower. The equipment would have probably changed a little bit differently. They would have gone to less loft, things of that nature. But yeah, I mean, you're definitely, you're spot on there with with the correlation between the equipment and that time. But it's a very difficult game to play, and beating that ground with your body is, your wrist and time again. I mean, that's not a healthy recipe for a long career.
Yeah, okay, I got to get us back on track, and it was my fault. I'm sorry, folks. So you speak about the club golfer sort of moving into more of a closed situation. So as I love your descriptor with a wrist out in front, how it was moving. So describe for the club golfer who may be tending open, and I would say probably 90% of them are, in transition, how that wrist you should feel like it moves as the body rotates open.
Yeah, so if you go to the top of your backswing and you have your left hand up in the air and your left hand only on the club, and imagine you were holding kind of a fishing pole in your left hand. Okay. And everybody knows what a casting motion looks like. Mm-hmm. It's an uncocking of the wrist. And wow, here we go. We're getting into taboo. This guy is talking about casting the golf club from the top. I know people are going to think I'm absolutely nuts.
Myth destroying.
But the bottom line is this. As you uncock the club, you're actually not physically going to be able to uncock the club as if you were casting a fishing pole because of other torques that are happening on the club via rotation of your body. Mm-hmm. So I'm blending a rotational movement with the body with this feeling of uncocking the left wrist or casting a fishing pole, and also at the same time putting your left wrist into flexion. So that's that bowing or arching feel. So on the lesson tee, we call it flexion with ulnar deviation. So that's the uncocking and bowing of the left wrist. And what you'll see if you look at a golfer from face on, you won't see the angle between the left arm and the shaft getting narrower. You will see that angle getting wider.
Yeah, I love it.
And as that angle gets wider, there's a couple of things that are happening here, Mark. The sweet spot is lowering down behind the golfer. The center of mass of the club is lowering down behind the golfer. So it's creating some geometry. And your mind's already gone there, probably. You're thinking, oh, I already know where he's going. That geometry is the sweet spot is now traveling more in to out relative to that golf ball. Yeah. We know that most golfers are out there slicing.
I was about to say, you're fixing slices here.
Yeah, you're already changing their ball flight. But as I'm lowering that thing down to the inside, I'm coming from the inside, I'm getting rid of the slice, but the club head is getting lower to the ground, which means the angle of attack is getting shallower. So now I've got a shallower angle of attack coming more from the inside. Here goes our compression, starting to climb. And so as I'm going into flexion, I'm closing that club face. I'm reducing dynamic loft. I'm having the sweet spot travel more from the inside on a shallower angle of attack. I mean, how many benefits do you want me to name here? I can keep going and going and going.
Hey, that's enough.
Right?
For me, this has been like gospel. I think it's enough already. There's so much for the folks listening to this, even the good player to go and chew on, because I think at times, even the good player listening to this is thinking, well, they're talking to the medium handicapper here. The good player needs to bear this stuff in mind too, because when you add speed to the equation, you better be pretty precise as to where you're presenting this club face to the arc.
Yeah, I mean, Mark, I'm talking to 80% of the PGA Tour right now.
Yeah, man. Listen up, folks.
I see it every single week.
So true.
Yep.
Jeff, you there still?
So, yes.
Go ahead.
Sorry. So the last thing I was going to say, and this is more of a question for you, if you're envisioning that transition move where the wrist is going into flexion and ulnar deviation, and that sweet spot's lowering down behind you, and that club face is closing, and that angle's getting wider, and that club's getting lower to the ground, what is the golfer's response going to be with their pivot to that?
Man, he's going to turn. He's going to start rotating. He or she.
Has to.
Yeah.
He has to. So going back to my initial statement, I believe that everything a golfer does with their body is in response to how that center of mass is moving in transition. When I lower that thing down behind me, I have two options. I can slide into the golf ball and hit the ground way behind the ball, or I can maintain my body's inclination and turn and rotate and move the bottom of that arc forward so I hit the ball before the ground. And I don't think golfers need to think about that.
Yeah,
they don't have to consciously think about it. They have to hit one shot doing that and go, wow, I just hit the ground 6 inches behind the ball. I'm not going to do that on the next swing. How do I fix that?
Okay.
I'm going to start turning and rotating more.
All right, last.
So the next thing you know, we've shallowed the angle of attack. We've de-lofted the club because we've closed the club face angle. We've rotated more, which has created more shaft lean, and now we've got some compression.
Man, Starling, one more question here, boss, because I've seen it happen. You've seen it happen back in the day. Maybe sometime on the PGA Tour, you got the guy, the early extender or the girl, and then the body stands up and sort of tilts to give themselves space, and so the approach is all over the show. Now the folks have got the club more laying down behind them, but they still got some of that slide and tilt thing going on, and so they're hitting the ground early. Share a quick drill, something to help a golfer rotate better through the golf ball. Do you have something like that?
Yeah, I've got a million different little drills that I'll put players through on the range. But I will say this, Mark, it's very rare to find that combination. Okay. To find a golfer who actually shallows the club, who early extends, because, again, I'm going back to my statement. Why do they do what they do?
Yeah, right. Okay,
golfers who early extend, they do it because, A, in transition, the center of mass of the club isn't moving behind them. It's staying vertical. It's steep. The early extension is simply a way to put a late outward force on the grip to get the club to shallow very late. So if you think about the greatest of all time, a Jack Nicklaus, if you look at Jack's swing, you're going to see in transition a little bit of a steeper move, left arm a little bit more out, club not laying down so much, but then you're going to see Jack kind of stand up, a little bit of early extension, club lays down, and then he goes into that big reverse seat.
Yeah.
And the thing that I tell people is that you don't be extreme in what you do and what you teach, because that saying early extension is bad. Nobody can do that. Let's get every golfer to not do that anymore. I've measured an incredible number of high-level players on 3D who have early extension with their driver. And I believe that most good drivers with golf ball have some early extension because, A, how we're using the ground.
And they can hit up on the
how
ball
we're
more.
creating force out of the ground. They can hit up on the ball.
Yeah.
They can hit the ball high. You know, those are all things that most golfers need to try to be able to do. Hit it far and hit it high. I think they'd shoot lower scores if they could do that.
Man,
but
that's such cool stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I start with a fundamental understanding of body segments. I teach them what the pelvis is doing at setup, what the pelvis should be doing in the course of the backswing, how it's rotating and staying on an inclination. In transition, how it lowers and maintains the tilt. And through the ball, how it rotates and maintains the tilt. So I talk a lot about geometry in my lesson.
Okay.
And I use a golf cart steering wheel. I'll have them stand to the side of the golf cart and look at the steering wheel, and I'll rotate it. And I'll say, this steering wheel is your pelvis. If I turn it this way, where's your right hip going? Oh, it's going up and back. And then when you swing down, where's your left hip going? Oh, it's going up and back.
Okay. Yes.
So they see the geometry of the circle on the steering wheel, and they're like, oh, so my hips need to work like that. And if their hips work like that, they're maintaining their inclination to the ground, so their tilts are correct. They've got more control over the club face and more control over the club path.
Oh, beautiful, man. You said this has been such great stuff. I could keep you for hours, but you got commitments and family and such waiting. Jeff, you've been a superstar. I know folks want more. I know you're unavailable or limited availability given your commitments on the PGA Tour. But I know you've got I know you've got a YouTube channel and social media and such. Where do the folks get you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Radar Golf Pro. And, you know, I'm working on something pretty big right now, Mark, that I think everybody will love. It kind of feeds back into my story of how I got into golf and how I was very, very eager to learn. And I'm in the process of developing a membership site. And this membership site is going to be for players and for instructors alike. And it's basically, I'm pulling together a team of some of what I feel like are the brightest minds in golf. And I think some of these guys have been on your show before. Jeff Pierce.
Yeah.
Shaheen Giovanni from Canada. And so basically, if you think of Netflix and you go on there and, wow, here's these movies, titles, I'm going to have a team of guys who is going to have sort of their own Netflix channel where they're going to be presenting their information. They're going to have the courage to stand in front of a camera and give great information. And people are going to be able to subscribe to this website, subscribe to this membership site. It's going to be very low cost.
That's cool.
And, I mean, it's going to be incredible. And it's just expanding the free flow of information to players and students. And I'm really excited about it. I'm hoping to launch that thing somewhere in early mid-July.
Well, come on, man. We are all waiting with bated breath. Jeff, you've been a superstar. Thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate you joining us and sharing all of your insights, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mark. I've been wanting to be on your show for quite a while. I've been a listener for forever.
Well, welcome to our tribe, brother.
This segment of the On the Mark podcast was brought to you by Synovus. Synovus, the bank of here. Yes, indeed. That mind, a member of the tribe, he's just like you and me. He too, and I love the idea that he and Shaheen, who you can hear if you go and search for Shaheen Nakjavani, that's first name is spelled Shauhen, go search for those in our cache of podcasts at pgatour.com/podcasts or at pgatour.com/onthemark or at iTunes or Stitcher or TuneIn, wherever you get yours. Go and look for them. Jeff Pierce has been on the show. Joe Mayo has been on the show. A whole bunch of these guys, and they're doing the same thing that we are. And we are going to continue to work adjacent to these folks to get great minds on you so we can bring you good stuff. And that there was really good stuff. A beautiful way of Jeff describing how proper contact happens and how matchups in the golf swing happen. I've always maintained, they've done all the research. Me, I've just been a playing instructor through my years who's been successful as a golf teacher globally, and I've gotten to chat with many great players, and it's always been my opinion that golf swing mistakes, and I use the term mistakes in inverted commas, they come in two. It's a matchup, really. If you've got one error, it doesn't have a corresponding matchup
or a compensation, then the swing will be inconsistent. So matchups are important. And I appreciate folks respecting matchups because that allows you to effectively swing your swing. And we've done podcasts like that before. You've heard Jeff Leishman on the show, who works with Daniel Berger. So super stuff. I would advocate that you go and understand how your pelvis works. Go and understand how that middle rotates on an incline. A simple drill that I oftentimes use is just to assume your posture, no club, and just sort of ease back towards a wall, just so you got a little bit of space between your buttocks and the wall, and then rotate back and feel your trailing hip rotate behind you and raise and just touch the wall. And then as you rotate down, feel like your leading hip rotate and raise out of the way so you touch the wall, and you'll feel how you transfer pressure in the ground. You'll feel how you turn on your incline, on your spine angle, on that geometry that Jeff is talking about. And if you get that stuff, which incidentally he's worked on with Aaron Wise, the 2018 winner of the At&T Byron Nelson, if you get that down, it sort of puts in position the axle for this wheel that is the golf swing. So superb stuff there from Jeff Smith. And I charge you to share that one with your golf buddies. So much good information on there. So much stuff that is guaranteed to help you to better understand it. To understand what's necessary so that you can get the most out of your practice. So that when you go to the practice facility, you're not just blindly hitting golf balls. Understand shaft lean, understand spin lift, understand rotation, understand all these things, understand matchups so that you can practice with purpose. We want to bring you good information so that you can do the right thing for your game so that you can improve. That is the sole reason why this On The Mark podcast exists. I appreciate you guys. Get out, play golf, have lots of fun, make lots of birdies. Take it easy.
This broadcast and all associated rights, including copyright, are owned exclusively by the PGA Tour and may not be used in whole or in part without the prior written permission of the PGA Tour.
Synovus is the bank of here. Here is a fairway that took shape before engines replaced horses. Here's where some days you lay up, and others you just go for it. Here's where you don't even need a tee time. And here's where a casual conversation on the back nine turns into a successful business expansion. Here should be the most important place to your bank, because here is where you are. Synovus, the bank of here. Banking products provided by divisions of Synovus Bank. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.